All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Zero waste, Houston. Stop wasting time. Let's make it happen. All right, so beginning with the big picture. The problem, obviously, is waste. The U.S. produces more waste than any other country. We produce 260 million tons of waste per year. In Texas, that's 41 trillion pounds per year. So the average amount of waste per person per day in the U.S. is 4.5 pounds. Globally, it's only half of that. It's closer to 2 pounds per person. And Texas beats everything. We produce 5.6 pounds of waste per person in Texas each day, which is a lot. Where does it all go? Obviously, off to the landfill. So here in Texas, we, the taxpayers, we are paying to have our waste stored in landfills. We pay on average $28.95 per ton of the waste that we're putting into landfills. The city of Houston actually has a little bit lower rate than the average because we have more trash, but we actually pay $24 per ton. But if you think about it, we're paying to keep our waste. We are paying money to physically hold on to and keep our waste. And so we need to end that that system essentially that we're relying on. Landfills have many costs. From our long-term financial costs, like I mentioned, we're paying to maintain and have these landfills. So if we maintain the status quo of landfilling, there's actually enough landfills in Texas for 60 more years of landfilling the way that we're doing it now, which really means 60 more years of paying for landfills, of landfill payments. But of course, more importantly than money, are the environmental costs associated with landfilling. Many of these, as you mentioned earlier, Carol, being climate change. Landfilling causes climate change. Many people don't know this, but the combination of non-food waste and organic matter contained in an anaerobic space, like a landfill where air cannot get to it, actually the breakdown causes the production of methane, which we know is a greenhouse gas that in its first 20 years of release into the atmosphere is 84 times more potent than CO2. So a huge chunk of Texas's contribution to our greenhouse gas problem is simply just from landfills. Not only that, but as you can see on the map here, there are other environmental and social costs associated with landfills. Many of them are leaking into groundwater in Texas. There are 198 landfills in Texas, and over 1/3 of them are leaking into groundwater. So why does this happen? This happens because we have a linear way of producing and consuming and disposing of everything that we use. So from the extraction to the manufacturing to the distribution to the consumption to the disposal, it's a straight line where something is created and used one time, and that's it. So we want to change that linear model that we're so familiar with into a much more circular and sustainable model. And so that's a little bit where the idea of our solution to this landfill problem is in zero waste. Zero waste, the goal of zero waste is to divert over 90% of all what would be considered waste, of all of our produced waste, diverting it from landfills and incinerators. We are able to achieve zero waste by improving the efficiency of our products and the efficiency of our system infrastructure. That's how we're going to prevent waste, is doing both of those things simultaneously. So, we're redirecting our resources when we manage waste, when we achieve zero waste, rather than just managing the waste. We are redirecting all of the different components that we consider waste. So why do we want to do this? For a number of reasons. This will save energy and reduce emissions, like I mentioned. We can have a significant reduction to our greenhouse gases. If we diverted 75% of US waste from landfills, that would be equivalent to closing 21% of our coal-fired power plants. And just the production, again, we're contributing so much to this to our emissions because we're contributing to stuff that's getting used once. So the food and consumer goods and all the services that we're producing and only using one time that have such a short lifespan contributes to 40% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. So zero waste means not keeping the waste and also not allowing it to be created in the first place. Recycling obviously is going to be a huge part of this. So we already are, off to, benefiting from recycling. In Houston, we have 14,000 jobs already created, and there is so much room for improvement. That's what's so great about recycling and zero waste is this is an existing untapped industry that is very, very small right now, but just as it grows, we will only see benefits increase, and as well as a huge job market that will come along with it. So it's a win-win situation. So how do you get there? And that's what I'm going to talk about next. Is there are so many things that go into a zero waste plan, and many different pieces. The first thing you have to do is just create the plan itself. So in Houston, we've heard that there's going to be, the mayor's looking to create a new plan for waste management. We're going to be encouraging him to make the plan itself a zero waste plan, and not just say that, but outline the entire proposal for what that's going to look like in the state. And that plan will consist of policies, programs, incentives, city ordinances, both for the city and for businesses and corporations, to participate in different, practices, as well as individuals. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to is, changing our individual behavior to follow this zero waste plan. This link here on the bottom is great. This is an EPA, it's called the Transforming Waste Tool. And if you click on the link that says implementation examples, they've got a whole list of like 100 different types of waste plans that many different cities have adopted, all the different kinds. And the second one on the list is a zero waste plan. So that's a good starting point. Go to implementation examples, and the second choice is zero waste, and you can see the other cities that have already adopted a zero waste plan. Some of them are in Texas. So we've got Dallas, has a specific goal by a certain year, as well as Austin and San Antonio, many other major cities. Have already set this goal. So like I said, we want the mayor of Houston and the head of the solid waste department to commit to an actual, giving us an actual plan that is a zero waste plan. So that's the first step, just create the plan. Next is going to be all of the different moving parts to the plan and pieces that can fit in. So recycling for apartment buildings is huge. There currently is no recycling in apartment buildings in Houston at all. And with Houston being the 4th largest city in the country, and we've got 41% of our residents who live in apartment buildings, that's a huge chunk of the population who cannot recycle at their easiest convenience. Therefore, they probably don't. So we've got other cities in Texas, again, Austin, San Antonio, and Fort Worth all have recycling in their apartments. So we need to definitely include that in our zero waste plan. And you can also do it for businesses and commercial recycling as well. So Los Angeles uses something called a district franchise ordinance, where the city is split into districts, but the city will negotiate a contract for all the commercial waste and recycling through one company that will service all of those districts. So that way no district gets left out. It's one recycling contract for all the businesses through that particular type of ordinance. Obviously, the next thing is composting. That's how we're going to get all of that food waste out of the landfills, stop having it contribute to this methane production, essentially. So taking the food out of the landfill. Again, Austin and San Antonio are already beating us here. They've rolled out curbside composting pickup. And the collected compost actually is taken to a commercial composter and turned into usable product for gardens and for essentially for any agriculture business that the average person can buy compost that's made from these compost producers. So Nature's Way, if you've heard of that, it's exactly where they get their compost from. It's collected from consumers, turned into usable compost, and sold back to consumers. So it's a circle effect. Another really, this is a tried and true policy that's been going on for decades. It's called pay-as-you-throw. They use this all over the world, in fact. Currently in Houston, we don't have a garbage fee. We pay for our trash pickup through our property tax. Pay-as-you-throw treats trash a little bit more like a utility, where you would pay for how much you use, just like electricity, water, gas. So they can do it in a couple ways. They can do it where you pay for the number of bags of trash that you produce, or they can do it through the size of bin that you have. So that way it's a lot more fair and equitable way to transfer the burden of paying for trash, make the people who produce the most trash pay the most for it. And that's how, again, this is done all over the world. This is a fair way to do this. The city should lead by example. This is definitely has to be included in a zero waste plan. The cities can have green purchasing policies where they're called cooperative purchasing programs, where city businesses or city buildings and departments will only purchase recycled paper. They're going to purchase products that minimize hazardous waste. Cities should hold events that promote recycling. They should just set the example by showing active, available, functioning recycling in all public spaces, in parks, in public transportation. The city should be setting the standard for how the rest of us handle our recycling and our compost, and then anything else that's left. Education is huge. Definitely everyone should look into community-based social marketing, which is, and the city can educate residents on how to kind of do internal education among communities. So community-based social marketing is people reinforcing each other's actions. And so you can have someone on your block be the block leaders, so once the new waste plan gets rolled out, who's going to be monitoring it to see if people are following through and see if it's working, and maybe the signs are not clear enough, or maybe they're not in the right language, or maybe, they're not as effective as you need them to be. So you got to have someone following up and throughout the entire process. People like to be known for achieving things. So there's also really good recognition and certification programs that businesses, schools, restaurants can achieve to be considered certified green. That helps boost customer responsibility. We have more people coming to restaurants, schools. You have families more likely to want to send your kids there. So really, it just kind of creates this positive competition, encouraging other people to also meet these zero waste goals and get their certification as well. This one I'm really into the reuse of materials, whether that is through building materials as well as food, of course. There's actually networks throughout the city where there's online sharing networks where you can, which really do need a lot more attention. We're just kind of a sharing economy of used materials that just need a new home. And so you can actually do that before and after buildings are constructed through promoting recycled content in the use of building new buildings. But there's also organizations right here in Houston that will go to a building before it's going to be demolished and take out the parts that can be reused to build something else. So again, all these types of programs and ideas already exist. We're just waiting for the zero waste plan to basically make them the norm, make them part of how we always go about things. So that's just so cool to me. And then your traditional, hazardous materials, hard to recycle stuff. So, creating a policies and structure for how we're going to collect hazardous waste, e-waste, batteries, hazardous materials. Again, there are already existing businesses and nonprofits who can create partnerships to do all of this work together. We've just got to get everyone connected through a functioning zero waste plan. And of course, plastic bags is a huge way to divert waste from the landfill. 10 cities in Texas have already established or were able to get ordinances to ban plastic bags. And the legislation of Texas has repeatedly tried to stop this. Just recently in the past session, Senate Bill 103 was a bag ordinance preemption, which was they tried to prevent cities from being able to bag bans. It's kind of like a bag ban. However, TCE was working on supporting House Bill 3482, which was protecting cities' right to bag bans. Unfortunately, it died before it came up for a vote in the House, but there is a bag case from the city of Laredo that will be making it to the Supreme Court. So this is, such an important way to reduce waste. It's such a huge amount of waste comes from plastic bags. And then, of course, last but not least at all is our personal waste goals. This is really where it all starts, honestly, because when you use reusable items, you are reducing waste at the source. You're not going to buy. And also you benefit because it saves you money. You're not going to buy a reusable paper cup or get your food in a styrofoam container. Once you get in the habit of using all of these things, using your own Tupperware, your own coffee mug, your own bags. Businesses like it too. It saves them money. They don't have to spend money on buying styrofoam. So it's just the more we all do it and we all see each other do it, that's how it's going to seem normal to enact a zero waste plan. And you can even have fun with it. Like if you've got kids, or just if you're into doing weird things like games amongst yourself, challenge yourself. How many days can you go without using a plastic bag, without throwing away a paper cup? And it's fun. I think that's fun to do. So here's the good thing. We've got Mayor Turner, is very, very clear that he wants Houston to set the standard when it comes to climate change. This is what he said about making Houston a sustainable city. And so he wants us to be a global city. We're going to do that by improving the lives of our communities. He wants to make this part of his agenda. So essentially, it's this improved quality of life and long-term savings that he's going to be looking for. And he can do that by giving us a zero waste plan. And Harry Hayes as well, who's the head of our solid waste management department. Reluctantly, but although he said it, that a zero waste plan is the best case partnership for us to get, out of this locked in landfill, dependent state that we're in right now, is to really improve our recycling system. So we were told months ago that we would be moving towards a zero waste plan, and we still have yet to see the beginnings of that plan, but that's what we'll be talking about here in a minute, actually. But in the meantime, there's also many things that everyone can do. This is, across the board, not just in Houston. But first of all, do it as much as you can yourself. Recycle, compost if that's possible for you. If you, even just a little bit, and look for resources of how you can, participate, volunteer, and be part of other groups in your community who are taking these initiatives on themselves. And certainly contact your elected officials, contact your mayor, your city council, write to your state lawmakers and asking them to support zero waste policies. We are going to be, I'm glad we're having this call because we're going to be sort of springing into action when we do finally get this request for proposals out from the city. And so I guess we'll talk about that plan of action here in a minute. That's kind of just the rundown on some of the things that can make up a zero waste plan. Does anybody have any questions about any of that so far?
A lot of you guys are on mute. If you want to unmute yourselves, Roseanne might have to unmute some folks.
Yeah, I'm gonna unmute it.
Thing, but I thought that was an excellent presentation, Roseanne. Roseanne has been learning very quickly, and she's her experience advocating for renewable energy and the fracking moratorium in New York shows that her experience shows. So, does anybody have any questions?
I don't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I have some things that I'm writing down that I think will go with the discussion later of what we do next. But so far, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Carol.
Anybody else got any questions? Okay. Well, real briefly, this is Melanie Scruggs speaking. I'm going to give a little bit of overview of where we've been to set the stage for these next steps that we've been planning. So the Zero Waste Houston Coalition started having pretty regular meetings at the beginning of the year or late last year. We've done a few activities trying to plug in folks. Ever since the election, there's been a lot of more interest in actually participating in climate action and local policy action that affects our lives. So we've done a city council lobby training. We have gone and toured a recycling facility. We did a tour of a composting facility, and we have been plugging people into letter writing campaigns for folks to write Mayor Turner and City Council and ask them to support a zero waste plan. Several folks have also participated in advocacy at the state level during the legislative session. There were a few bills related to the rights of cities to pass single-use bag ordinances, which Roseanne talked about, and Sandra Peters and Carol Burris and several others actually went to Austin and lobbied on these issues. There's been a lot of activity. When we had a meeting in, I believe it was September at First UU, we were doing a brainstorming session of what should be some of the key elements of a zero waste plan. And many of the elements that Roseanne just went through came out of that meeting. And that was the meeting where Sarah Mason, who is with the Solid Waste Management Department, told us that the city is going to be putting out what's called a request for proposals for a zero waste consultant or a waste consultant to write a long-range waste reduction plan and recycling plan for the city of Houston. So that was September. Then Harry Hayes came out at this conference and said that the Houston had made the determination to go to zero waste. And that was very significant because Harry Hayes is also one of the mayor's top advisors. Then in January, we've been in touch with Harry Hayes in the mayor's office, and he'd said that the request for proposals for this waste plan would be coming out by the end of January. In May, they told me no more than 3 weeks would it be out, and it still hasn't come out. So we're really disappointed that there hasn't been progress, tangible progress, on getting a zero waste plan in Houston, despite the growing numbers of folks participating in this coalition effort. So the task in front of us is how do we get these folks to pay attention and actually, get something done. I think that the major challenges and the reasons why it hasn't come out have to do with the financial issues with the city of Houston and the fact that the mayor has invested so much of his energy in reforming our pension problem. Now going into November, the financial issue is going to be lifting the revenue cap. That's going to be on the ballot in November for voters to repeal this revenue cap so the city can have more of a sustainable revenue. So that's the big challenge. What I also heard directly from Harry Hayes is that there are still people who are advocating for one bin for all. Which, if you all remember, that was this proposal that we fought really hard and thought that we had defeated last year. For 3 years, we fought this one bin idea, which Mayor Parker put forward. which was to put all the trash and recycling into the same bin, and then to finance a big facility where workers and machines would sort through it. And we showed that, this does not work. We had paper recyclers coming in town, and glass recyclers, and the Institute for Scrap Recycling Industries, the National Recycling Coalition, literally all of the major recycling trade associations actually lobbied the city of Houston side by side with the environmental groups like us, and Annie Leonard with Story of Stuff, and Michael Brune with Sierra Club sent in a statement, all saying that this one bin thing was just a path to incineration, because there's nothing left to do with materials that are being all mixed together other than burn it. So unfortunately, we found out that there are still people pushing for one bin, and that might be a reason why this zero waste plan hasn't come out, because they're trying to get one bin technology to be somehow a part of the plan. So now is a good time for us to come up with some creative ideas to reboost our efforts and quit waiting and quit wasting time. So with that, maybe we can brainstorm some ideas that folks have.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Frank.
Related to what you just said. If I understand correctly, the city is looking at getting a consultant to write the zero waste plan, but they have not yet picked the consultant they want to use. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, the solid waste department was trying to write a plan in-house, and they decided that they didn't have the right skills. And even Austin hired a consultant to do their zero waste plan.
So that's fairly typical for a city
Yes.
to hire a consultant. Yes, that makes sense. So in terms of you're hoping the city to announce something about the zero waste plan in advance of hiring the consultant. I mean, you were just looking for them to make a public statement about that, basically, that they were wanting to head in that direction, and they were in the process of hiring a consultant.
Exactly. I mean, once the RFP, the request for proposals, is out, then it's public that the city is moving forward with some kind of zero waste plan. That at the very least gives us the leave to then, put out press releases and put pressure on the mayor to explain publicly that this is what he's doing, is moving forward with a zero waste plan. So that would count as pretty much a public statement. Obviously, we would want them to do more than just put it out. We would want, the mayor to do press conferences and all that.
Melanie, can you hear me?
Yes, who is that?
Melanie, it's Elizabeth.
Hey.
So, hi. Two things. Number one, I'm wondering what kind of evidence is there for the PayAsYouGo? It was described as fair. I'm wondering if we're looking at data from other PayAsYouGo programs so that the poor don't get socked with, paying more relative to the amount of their income, as opposed to the rich, who clearly can afford to trash more, yet it's in terms of fairness, if you dig a little bit deeper. And then secondly, I'm wondering about TCE. Is it not equipped to help the city write the plan instead of hiring an expensive consultant?
Those are great questions. So with PayAsYouThrow, the studies that you can look at are on the EPA's website. This is one of their recommendations to local governments to reduce waste and incentivize recycling. But you raise an excellent point about we need to do research and start the conversation about how we could potentially structure this in a way that's not a burden to low-income residents. Because I know that is going to be Mayor Turner's huge concern. And I can tell you right now that he's not going to have any interest in talking about a garbage fee until after the revenue cap is taken care of. It's a big ask to, ask for multiple tax increases or fee increases.
Another part of that is historically in Houston, there's been a real problem with illegal dumping in many neighborhoods, and the garbage fee would exacerbate that unless you really thought it through and dealt with that in advance.
And your other question about TCE advising the city on the plan, that's really not what we do. Our role is the advocacy. We're rabble rousers, we're organizers, we go door to door. However, and we can help with ideas and research, but it's not our role to perform a waste characterization study for the city of Houston or to do a waste audit. Those are the kinds of things that these consultants do.
All right. Thank you.
Question, maybe this is moving ahead a little bit, but when Austin or San Antonio started their pilot composting projects, were those pilot projects based on voluntary participation, or were they specific neighborhoods where everybody was required to participate?
So when San Antonio and Austin started their composting, curbside composting pilot programs, they created a test neighborhood. In San Antonio, it was about 16,000 homes. And then they said that households could opt in to the composting pilot for a small fee. So that's how they funded it, was through a small optional fee for certain neighborhoods, and then evaluated the effectiveness based on that.
Well, that bypasses the budgetary problems if there's a fee associated with it and it's voluntary.
Right. Are there any other questions or ideas for kind of what folks would like to do moving forward?
I wonder if anybody has ideas about how the part that Roseanne talked about cities setting the standard. I know that Steve Stelzer, who may be on this call, I saw his name, has worked with that in the Green Resource Building. And I know that, is it Lisa Lynn, when she was there, was one of their main things was moving the city of Houston into a greener process. And I don't know where we are on that. And those things cost money. For example, when I was riding the bus all the time before I got an electric car, I was seeing all this trash at the bus stop, and they had one trash bin, no recycling, nothing like that. That seems like a great opportunity to train people about, which things go in recycling, and, have clear pictures and things like that on there. So I don't know where the city is already on trying to be kind of the leader or setting the standard for events and things like that with recycling. I don't see them doing that yet.
It's a good point. It's kind of low hanging fruit.
I don't know if that's the number one thing we should do. It seems like since composting has a huge benefit, and because it would be cost neutral with just like Austin did it, where you choose a neighborhood that's most likely to participate, and one that works for the trucks to pick up and things like that. And then you arrange for that limited amount of compost that will be created to take it to a certain place that's already, like somewhere that's already doing it, like Farm Dirt or Nature's Way, and that if people opted in and there was a fee, that seems kind of like something that just kind of needs to be checked off. And well, I mean, there's more to it than that. It has to be set up. But it would be cost neutral, and that to me seems like a great thing. I mean, it might even be that you could make a little money to save up for other things related to that. Because if you charge people $5 a month, or even, whatever the fee would be, it seems like you could raise it a slight amount and even set that money aside for future composting projects or things like that. So I don't know.
This is Mary. I was also wondering if we had already done any work to find out what communities already would be interested in composting, and maybe already are starting to do it in a less formal way, so that we might be able to locate a model one to start with, like San Antonio did. I mean, I know West University is not part of the city of Houston, but they have a whole recycling system. Maybe some of the people who live adjacent to there might be interested in it. Also, at one time a few years ago, I heard a talk by a man who was setting up a composting program with school districts. Melanie, do you know anything about him or about that system? He was starting to compost food waste from school systems.
This was here in Houston? Was this here in Houston?
No.
Yeah, it was on the north side of Houston.
Wow.
I think you're right. I think there is somebody involved in HISD who's trying to start composting for some of the cafeteria materials, but not all. The answer is we haven't done any kind of survey to see which neighborhood would be a good pilot project, but that's something that we might be able to do in our canvassing program or online. There's all these next door networks. Like maybe we could circulate a survey of neighborhoods and interest in composting, curbside compost.
Yeah, one thing that you might find is that a lot of the people that are interested in composting do composting in their backyard in certain neighborhoods. But I was in New York City last spring, and I noticed that in a lot of the local parks, they would have composting drop-offs for the neighborhood. Of course, there a great percentage of people live in apartments, but there are parts of Houston that are becoming quite dense and a lot of apartment dwellers. And if you live in an apartment, you really don't have the option to do a backyard compost. So something like that, would require some thinking through. But what could be useful about that is that becomes a public thing. Like I would just bump into it visiting the parks in New York, and there would be the compost on weekend, Saturday or Sunday, there was a compost drop-off. And when it's just a day or two, it can be monitored, and I'm sure there are volunteers that oversee it and that sort of thing. But that became public education because it was a very visible thing that people bumped into.
But then who took the compost after it was dropped off?
Well, that was coordinated with the
function?
Parks Department. There's another part of this. I didn't go into that part, but this would not be something probably directed by the city. This would be something that well, unless it was through Parks and Recreation, but this would be something that interested groups could participate in or, work with and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and speaking go ahead.
It's just an idea. It would require some thinking to adapt it to Houston, but if you pick the right neighborhoods, this might be something that could be done.
Yeah, I was living in actually the last place I lived in New York City before moving to Houston, and that's the way that we're talking about composting right now is pretty much how it began in New York. It was nowhere when I moved there, over 5 years ago. And then when I left New York, my neighborhood had just gotten, we were part of the pilot program. So the city, I believe, in New York, the city pays for trash and recycling. And so the composting program was going to be paid through the city. So it's different than how it's set up here, obviously, but what you guys are talking about with how to figure, that's exactly what, it started with homes and small apartment buildings that were most likely to compost based on the type of households and type of people who live there. They tried it out there. Then the neighborhood that I lived in, we got a flyer from the city that said, we're going to try out composting in your neighborhood. Please, get back to us if you want one of these brown bins, and we will deliver it to your house within like 2 months or something. So it was paid for by the city, but we could opt into it if we wanted to. So it was cool. It was very cool.
Something that could dovetail with a pilot project is that if you did do that in a neighborhood, people could put their yard waste.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, that's probably just as much, if not, I mean, a lot of times just as much as food. Mm-hmm.
People would use that because there is a problem with the current Houston system of putting it in the designated plastic bags.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the yard people will not use those and they just throw it in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
There's a lot of non-compliance with the current system.
Mm-hmm.
Another vehicle for accomplishing this is the neighborhood associations or the super neighborhoods, because there you have a mechanism of leadership, and some of the super neighborhoods are pretty active and pretty progressive, others are not, but that might be a way to get a core leadership and find a place to get started.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
One option too, just for a location, there's a really large glass recycle bin at the West TC Jester Park. I don't know if you guys know where that is, like between West 34th and 43rd. And
Yeah.
I see people using that bin all the time. And so there's a lot of people that are going out of their way specifically to recycle their glass. That bin is always being emptied, and I see people at all times of day coming and going and dropping off their stuff there. And that might be a really good visible location to both have education pieces, maybe additional compost. There's lots of area over there. There's lots of space because it's a park. There's a ton of people coming and going. And then that particular area is becoming more and more gentrified. But there's also a lot of apartments. There's a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds of people from all ages, all wealth, income level gaps, kind of utilizing that park. And it's right next to the dog park. It gets a lot of that parking lot. It has a lot of people coming and going. So that might be one area, one neighborhood to kind of hit that's a little different than Westview, because I know sometimes, you know, they don't maybe have as much diversity as other places.
Yeah, and Westview is actually its own city, so they wouldn't even be covered by the city of Houston stuff. But, you know, it's a good point that the risk that we run into by, you know, targeting one neighborhood that shows a lot of interest to be of the composting pilot program, that can be a trap for convincing the mayor that other neighborhoods will participate. So that's definitely a good point to raise. Well, I know that we had said that this would last about an hour, so I want to be sure that if there's anybody who hasn't spoken up on the call that would like to, if you would like to have a chance to share an idea about next steps. Steve Stelzer is on mute. I don't know if that was, if he can get himself off mute, but. Anybody? Okay. Well, the ideas that have been shared today are ideas for the city to take into account and incorporate into its plan. So one thing that we have been telling them to do is to make sure that there is a lot of public input included in their plan. So that means that they're going to be holding public listening sessions all over the city, hopefully in the next year, to ask the public, what do you think, what should we be doing about recycling and composting? So as people who have ideas, it's our job to go out and get more people who have ideas to show up to these meetings. So that's one thing to keep in mind. One thing that folks could also do is actually have a meeting with Harry Hayes and share these ideas with him face to face, if there would be interest in that.
Yes.
And really, it would be a good idea if we can meet with the mayor himself.
After, can I say something?
Go ahead.
After we met with the city council this last time, you know, the question that they asked me, or one of them at least did, was, well, what exactly is zero waste? So it was pretty clear to me that, you know, with all of the different things that the city council has on their mind, that they don't really understand zero waste. So that leads me to two things. One is, how can we continue to educate the whole city council about what zero waste is? And two, maybe one of the next things we could do at a volunteer meeting is to create an elevator speech. create an elevator speech that explains what zero waste is. And that each one of us, while we're talking to other people, would be able to pretty quickly explain what it is zero waste is. And we might change it from time to time depending on who our audience is. But I think that that would be very useful. I became aware of that, and I thought, well, not only do I need to learn how to do that, but I bet all of our volunteers need to figure that out. I wanted to say one other thing. I'm very, very interested in this idea of repairing things that break. It has bothered me for so long that when I have a coffee maker that breaks, I cannot get the part. There's nowhere for me to take it. And it's like one little plastic piece that's broken, and I have to throw the whole thing away. And so I wonder if we could, I know there are some programs in schools that are vocational programs, and I wonder if there would be a way for us to help support or connect with programs that are maybe teaching some of our graduating students how to repair things. Now, they can only repair them if there are parts available. So maybe it'll be one certain, GE or Coffee Mate or whatever, one kind of appliance maker who would agree to have to sell things that could be repaired. And maybe those things would cost a little bit more to make it worth their while, but that they could advertise that they were part of a, save the planet, kind of thing. And these are ideas that are difficult, but it's like, I can't figure out how we're going to make this zero waste thing work if we don't have certain corporations or certain grocery stores that will use less packaging or certain things. And why not right here in Houston? Figuring out who those people would be and trying to create some of these pieces that don't necessarily have to do with the city.
Carol, let me address that just a little bit. I'm a part of Transition Houston, and we're in the process right now, partly at the encouragement of Steve Stelter, to start having what we call repair cafes periodically through the year and encourage more and more people to participate in that. So if TCE wants to do something on that direction, they could also work together with Transition Houston, because we're already starting to put that together.
What happens in one of those cafes?
You get volunteers who have a knack for fixing things, and you advertise what kind of things are being fixed at that cafe. And then anybody who shows up with their broken watch or coffee pot or whatever can bring it to be repaired. And then people, sort of take turns doing the repairs, those people who have some knack at it. And there are a lot of people who really enjoy it. It's taken off in a lot of other places in the country under that name.
How cool is that?
Cool. It's like a Mr. Coffee Shoe Hospital type thing.
I kind of just had Carol, what you mentioned about us being educated ourselves and needing to explain this idea to others, and therefore also at the end of the day explain it to city council and have them understand it. And then also what you just mentioned, Mary, I kind of just had an idea of like kind of like an ongoing zero waste tour kind of thing, where it sounds like there's, you mentioned super neighborhoods, you mentioned these repair cafes. It sounds like there are already groups of people getting together all over the city to talk about these little different moving parts. And out of the zero waste plan points that I was speaking about earlier, some of them, really can only be enacted by the city. A big pilot program to do composting, that's something that, the city will have to do. We can start it, but it's almost as if we need to be just spreading the information of what zero waste is from community to community, just to get people thinking and realizing that that's that's to talk about it so much that it just seems normal now, so going to these super neighborhood meetings, bringing it up at repair cafes, it's almost like having a consistent message throughout every single conversation. And like you said, Carol, that everyone should be able to give their elevator pitch on what zero waste is and why it's necessary, so that every single time there's a conversation about plastic bags or about composting or about apartment buildings or about businesses, that this zero waste, what we want the city to do to achieve zero waste will be able to be, explained very, very comprehensively. So it's almost like what we all need to be doing is speaking to each other and just kind of really connecting the dots between all these already existing meetings and all these existing groups of people who are already getting together on different ways of reducing waste. We just need to connect the dots a little bit more and get people repeating the same messages. That zero waste.
Well, Roseanne,
Yeah.
Roseanne, if maybe we could help you, publish through just email distribution or something, a list of meetings and stuff that we're all sort of familiar with.
Yeah.
And then all of us on this call, at least, if not more people, could sign up and say they're going to go to those meetings and find a way to introduce the idea of zero waste. So we start infiltrating the whole community with that idea.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be wonderful. I definitely am going to have the information for everybody on this call, as well as the, everyone who was invited to join this call, but certainly the people who are all here right now. I will, I'll send a follow-up email to all of us and say, start sending in the dates, the locations, the times of when these types of things occur. And I'm also I'm a huge fan of just regular contact among all of us who want to work on this. This is this is the beginning of the Zero Waste Coalition here in Houston. So I feel that we need to be talking, on a somewhat regular basis, by no means like every single week at a specific time, but it could get to that. We want to be prepared for when the city does release this plan. So the more that we're communicating now on a regular basis, then let's say the RFP comes out, boom, we're ready to go. We know, what is our response? What if we're going to do a press release, what's it going to say? And then we have, maybe these previous meetings where we can back it up, saying we were in this town this day, we were in this town this day, or part of town this day. So that would be my two recommendations. Let's keep each other in the loop on when people are getting together in person to talk about this, and then we can maybe arrange the next time to have a call similar to this one with feedback from what happened. So I'll send out an email to start kind of generating those when we're hearing about events, and maybe when the next call similar to this one could be.
You're right, Roseanne. There's so many different things happening in Houston, and so we actually started to get together with a little group on the north side, where there's too much for everybody to be plugged into, and so I'll bring information from here. There's other people who are like at the Democratic Party, and they'll bring in information of what's going on there. Different people are plugged into different things, and we kind of, I think we called it Spring Hub on Facebook, but we basically are going to bring in all the information that we've been gathering and then do the letter writing and all that kind of stuff and kind of support each other, and then support getting the word out on all this kind of separate stuff. Is it, Melanie and Roseanne, are we still doing a letter writing campaign? We're just maybe changing the verbiage to actually following through with the commitments to zero waste. And then other than, I heard still trying to get together and maybe talk to the city council. Is there, and Harry Hayes, is there anything else that you want us to do, like the group that I'm going to get to next week? Is there other things that we're focusing on right now that I can tell them?
That's a great idea. So one thing that Roseanne can do and I can do is update the letter flyer that we have. It's a letter writing flyer to be a little bit more urgent and say that, we want progress on the commitments that have been made to move forward with a zero waste plan for Houston. Another thing that folks can be aware of is that Roseanne is available to give presentations to any group, anywhere in the city. If it's a business group, if it's a neighborhood club. So Kelly and everybody, if you have a group or a neighborhood that you would like a speaker, just ask Roseanne to come. And one of our volunteers, Kelly White, also is now trained in giving presentations. If you would like to be trained in giving this presentation, just get with Roseanne and we can make these Google slides available and the talking points available, and you can be an educator about what zero waste is. The quickest way and most sensible way I've thought of to explain what zero waste is it's a goal to reduce up to 90% of discards from landfills through waste reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting. So that's good to include as a goal to get at least 90% of reduction of waste to landfills through reuse, waste reduction, recycling, and composting. Beyond that, it's about designing things to be recyclable and compostable. So those are the most basic components. Before we wrap up, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be on this call today, and let you know that my last day at Texas Campaign for the Environment is tomorrow, and I'm so excited that Roseanne is taking the reins, and she is just hitting the ground running and learning really quickly. So if there's any support that you can give to Roseanne, information you've learned about this topic or ideas you have, requests of her, just immerse her in this community just like you did with me. So she's going to do great, and it's been really amazing working with you all and our other allies here in Houston. So yeah, I'm going to miss y'all. I'm going to graduate school in Austin. That's where I'm going. So, but I'll be around, and I'll send you all my personal contact information so we can stay in touch.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Melanie.
It's been fun, Melanie.
Thanks, Melanie. Oh, I forgot to also mention, we have a really good Facebook page. If anybody wants to be an admin of the Facebook page, that's a good thing to plug people into. And also our Google group, you know, any interesting zero waste stuff that you come across on the internet, you can share it with the Google group and invite people to be a part of that. Yeah, this is how change starts, is with a small group of people just extending their networks and, you know, being strategic about who can actually do this. And in Houston, it's the mayor and city council really can make a big difference if we can galvanize the public support to, you know, get these policies in place, which we've already gotten their attention. They already know what we want. Now is really about just pushing them to follow through with these commitments, a lot of which are not going to be very cost intensive. It's just a matter of committing as the energy capital of the world, you know, to say that we're going to do something that makes a big difference on climate change and quality of life. So,
This is Mary, and I apologize for coming in late, but do we have any specific action related to this problem with the resurgence of one bin? Is there any one specific thing that we're planning to do or to get together to plan to do?
Okay, so one thing that might happen in the near future is that the city will be voting on its next curbside recycling contract. There's no immediate threat with the one bin proposal because the city is about to sign a 10-year contract to continue two bins. And that could literally happen anytime in the next month or 6 months or 8 months. It's got to happen before March 2018, but it could happen well before then. So when that contract comes out, I know Roseanne is going to be talking to reporters and telling them, you know, thank God we're not talking about canceling recycling, you know. And so the coalition can use that opportunity to say, here we are continuing with two bins and, you know, not one bin. So obviously we made the determination, and thank you, Mayor Turner, for abandoning that really stupid idea. We just got to make sure that it's not part of the zero waste plan as that process unfolds. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's good.
It's like we don't really have enough information yet. There's not enough action yet or specific related to the one bin for us to take action on it. We just have to keep emphasizing the things we want to emphasize.
Well, what the one bin people have been doing, which is the opposite of what we've been doing, we've been building broad-based community involvement and educating people about the need for a zero waste plan. They've been going directly to the insiders around the mayor and trying to convince people like Harry Hayes that like one bin is going to be the technology of the future. So we need to do that as well. And that's exactly what Roseanne and hopefully y'all will be working on, getting to the insider circle that seems to have a lot of weight at City Hall.
Okay.
So I would like to suggest that we meet like in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
Just like this.
Okay.
Could you send a kind of doodle poll to maybe choose the best night? Because Tuesday night's not the best night for me.
Okay.
I made a point to be here, but I had to cancel a couple of things.
Okay, that's perfect. Yes, I will do that.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for participating.
Hey,
in this.
Melanie, we love you.
Melanie's been a great resource for how many years now?
3.5.
3.5.
Thank you.
Have fun in Austin. We'll come visit.
Yeah, yep, anytime.
Oh, we will. Give us your contacts.
Okay, everybody.
We have an extra bed.
Okay, thank you, Melanie and Roseanne.
Thank you all so much. Talk to you soon.
We'll see.
Thank you, Melody and Roseanne.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck, Melody. This is Xisha Huang.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye. Goodbye, peacemonger. And